military pensions and repealing cuts in the military pensions, a measure that would seek to repeal a 1 percentage point reduction in the cost of living adjustment for military retirees. That was part of the budget deal passed by the House and Senate in December. Test vote expected on that at 5:30 today.
The Senate will come to order, and the chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. God of grace and glory, hear our prayer and answer us when we call. Lord, you forgive our sins and heal our sickness, for your mercy is great toward those who esteem your name. Thank you for your promises to never forsake us and to render ineffectual the weapons we face. Strengthen our senators in their efforts to do good, sustaining them in their labors. Give them more than human wisdom to solve the problems of these momentous times. Keep them calm in the quiet center of their lives so that they may be serene in the swirling stresses of their work. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me to recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Majority Leader.
I now move to proceed to calendar number 298.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 298, S. 1963, a bill to repeal Section 403 of the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2013.
Mr. President, 5:30 there be a roll call vote on the motion. Vote cloture on the motion to proceed, S. 1963. I'm told there are two bills of the desk due for second reading.
The clerk will read the title of the bills for the second time.
H.R. 3590, an act to protect and enhance opportunities for recreational hunting, fishing, and shooting, and for other purposes. H.R. 3964, an act to address certain water-related concerns in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Valley, and for other purposes.
I would object to any further proceedings with respect to these two bills.
Objection has been heard. And the bills will now be placed on the calendar.
Mr. President, today the United States Senate will consider legislation that would create new legislation, and it would restore earned retirement pay to the men and women of our armed forces. The measure restores cost of living adjustments for all military retirees regardless of their age, disability, or employment status. Congress should protect veterans who put their lives on the line to protect our country. I appreciate very much Senators Pryor, Sheen, Hagan, and Begich for their leadership on this issue. Although the provision reversed by this measure doesn't take effect until the end of next year, there is no reason to delay it. We should move forward with it. I hope Republicans will join Democrats to pass this bill without their usual partisan games. Unfortunately, the type of obstruction and delay tactics I just referred to was on full display here last week. On Thursday, the Senate fell one vote short of restoring unemployment insurance for 1.7 million Americans who lost their jobs through absolutely no fault of their own. Every single Democratic senator voted for this bill. A few reasonable Republicans, 4 to be exact, voted with us to restore benefits that boost our economy and provide a lifeline for out-of-work Americans. But we're still 1 Republican vote shy of being able to do this for these people. Mr. President, it's so unfair. If someone loses their job today, they can apply for unemployment benefits and get them restored immediately. Get them immediately, I should say. But if you've been out of work for a long time and are 57 years old, can't find a job, you need this. But you can't because of the Republicans, what they've done. When 1.7 million struggling Americans fall short on the rent, skip meals to save cash, or turn down the thermostat on freezing days, they will know who to blame. 41 Republican senators here. We only need 1 more Republican, a total of 5 out of 45, to step up and do the right thing for these desperate people. We're not going to stop pushing to restore emergency unemployment insurance. And the weeks to come, we'll vote again on this important issue, and again if we need to. In the meantime, I hope my colleagues across the aisle will think long and hard about their unsustainable position on this issue, a position that hurts middle-class families. Mr. President, in the weeks ahead, the Senate will also consider legislation to give 17 million minimum wage workers a much-needed raise and our economy a much-needed boost. No American working full-time should live below the poverty line, but many of them do. So we're going to push to make the minimum wage a living wage, raise it to $10.10 an hour. To ensure this country's economic success, it's crucial that every American has an opportunity to succeed. But when some people have to work 2 or 3 full-time jobs just to pay the rent and put food on the table, something's wrong. Minimum wage workers spend their paychecks in local stores, gas stations, and restaurants. That's why an increase in minimum wage will create 85,000 new jobs. This increase is also key to ensuring every full-time worker has a shot at entering the middle class. Contrary to the common belief, raising the minimum wage isn't just about helping teenagers earn a little extra cash. 2/3 of the people working for minimum wage are women. It's also about helping any woman, a 35-year-old woman earning half her family's income, and more than 1/4 of the workers who would benefit from a raise are supporting children. Last week, Republicans voted against the interests of middle-class Americans, doing their best to survive unemployment. When it comes time to consider Democrats' minimum wage proposal, I hope the Republicans will again choose the right thing, not the wrong thing as they've done so often. That is, they should stand up for middle-class families rather than resort to obstruction. Mr. President, I would ask the Chair to announce the business of the day.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to report to S-1963.
Mr. President.
Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, the Senator from Nevada is finished, and I would seek the floor for a few minutes.
Senator may proceed.
Mr. President, today the National Security Agency continues its indiscriminate collection of a massive number of phone records about Americans under Section 215 of the USA Patriot Act. Now, as a nation, I've said over and over again, we've long needed to have the national conversation about bulk collection that is now underway. And the Section 215 program should have been declassified long before it was. But I want to make very clear, as I've said before, I do not condone the way this or other highly classified programs were disclosed. I'm deeply concerned about the potential damage to our intelligence gathering capabilities, our foreign relationships, and national security. And I'm deeply concerned that one person with a security clearance could wreak this much havoc. According to the New York Times, Edward Snowden accomplished his heist of extraordinarily sensitive information about NSA activities with, quote, inexpensive, and widely available software, close quote. In other words, software that any one of us could get. He didn't even execute a particularly sophisticated breach. He did not apparently face a particularly complex technological challenge while removing these sensitive documents from the NSA trove. And yet he pulled off what the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, recently called the most massive and most damaging theft of intelligence in our history. Now, I've continually asked the leaders of our intelligence community, what are you doing to stop this from happening again? I've learned that the NSA has devoted substantial resources to fixing the faults that allowed this to happen. They've taken some steps to address them. They've identified a range of other actions that need to be taken. But one has to ask why, especially in the wake of the private Manning leaks, how could the NSA have allowed this to happen in the first place? I say this not to beat up on the NSA. I know we have some highly dedicated, patriotic men and women working there, and I applaud them for their service to their country. But when I hear their leadership ask us to trust that it will keep our information safe and that we should have faith in its internal policies and procedures, you have to ask, is this accurate? This is the same NSA that first told us this Section 215 program was essential to national security. They talked in speeches around the country. This has thwarted dozens of plots. I think the number was somewhere in the 50s. But then when they're asked questions in a congressional hearing specifically about it, that number went from in the 50s down to possibly 1. And the primary defense of the NSA's bulk collection program now appears to be the program is more of an insurance policy than anything else. But now even that new defense of theirs has been called into question. The Washington Post has reported that under this program, the NSA collects less than 30% of domestic phone records. The Wall Street Journal says the number is even less than 20%. But these estimates are consistent with the public copy of the President's Review Group report, which cautioned against placing too much value in this program as a tool to rule out domestic connection to a terrorist plot, thus the so-called insurance policy. The Review Group report tells us that it's precisely because, although the program is unprecedented in scope, it still covers only a portion of the total phone metadata held by service providers. So it appears to this senator that the intelligence community has defended its unprecedented, massive, indiscriminate bulk collection by arguing that it needs the entire haystack in order for it to have an effective counterterrorism tool. And now the American public finds, well, they really only have 20 to 30% of that so-called haystack. This is an extraordinarily, extraordinarily expensive program. And yet these revelations call even further into question the effectiveness of this program. Now, although the program is ongoing, some preliminary and positive changes are underway. Just last week, the Director of National Intelligence announced that the FISA Court has approved procedures under which the government will seek approval from a FISA Court judge before querying these phone records, absent a true, almost instantaneous kind of emergency. The President has directed the Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence to develop alternatives to the Section 215 phone records program and report back to him at the end of next month. Now, that's progress, but only some progress. It's not enough. is not going to be enough to just reform the government's bulk phone records collection program. The program, as expensive and extensive as it is not proven effective. But beyond that, it's not worth this massive, massive intrusion on the privacy of American people, of good, law-abiding men and women in this, what is supposed to be the greatest democracy on earth. Congress should shut it down. We should enact the bipartisan, bicameral USA Freedom Act. And then Congress has to examine carefully, and to the extent possibly publicly, the security breach that led to these revelations in the first place. Now, the Senate Judiciary Committee's had a number of hearings on this. We're going to continue this work on these issues at a hearing this week with the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. That's another voice concluding the Section 215 program should not continue. If the NSA is to regain the trust of the American people, it's got to spend less time collecting data on innocent Americans and more time on keeping our nation safe. Mr. President, I'd ask my full statement be made part of the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest an absence of quorum. And if time is time being divided?
Time is not currently being divided.
I'd suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte.
And the Senate in a quorum call. They're working today on military pay, specifically military pensions, and repealing the 1% point reduction in the cost of living adjustment for military retirees. That was part of the budget deal that was passed in the House and Senate in December. And it does look like they're going to do a test vote on that, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Over on the other side of the Capitol at the House, they were in earlier. And this week, they're going to be working on a bill to change the way that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is funded and run. And they could also take up an increase in the debt ceiling. There are reports that House Republicans are going to be meeting about the debt ceiling today at 5:30 Eastern Time. Eric Wasson tweets it's confirmed they're having that meeting. And Robert Costa says Speaker Boehner and other House leaders are going to be going over the debt limit options at their meeting tonight. Will likely be a long one. Dinner will be served per an internal memo. Again, those are just a couple of reporters' tweets regarding a debt ceiling meeting today at 5:30 Eastern among House Republicans. Ms. Baldwin. And the Senate's in a quorum call right now, waiting for Senator to come to the floor to speak. Again, working today on military pay, military pensions, and repealing the cost of living adjustment cut for military retirees. A test vote in about 3 hours, 5:30 Eastern Time. And while they're in this quorum call, we're going to take a look at part of today's Washington Journal and talking about Medicare Advantage.
For this segment is Sam Baker. He is a healthcare reporter for the National Journal. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So we're talking this morning about the Medicare Advantage program. For those who might not be familiar, explain exactly what that is.
All right, so Medicare Advantage is a subset of Medicare. It's privately administered Medicare coverage. So instead of just sort of the traditional Medicare program administered by the federal government, these are private plans that you can buy. They often have a little bit of supplemental coverage or wraparound coverage in addition to the traditional Medicare benefits, and they're administered by private insurance companies that are then reimbursed by the federal government.
And so how is that program affected by the Affordable Health Care Act?
The Affordable Care Act cuts Medicare Advantage relatively significantly. It's one of the bigger cuts in the law. This is a program that Democrats in particular have always felt overpaid, that it was paying insurance companies more to provide basically the same service that the government was already providing. So the Affordable Care Act cuts Medicare Advantage. And we saw last year, and insurance companies are afraid we're going to see this year, some additional cuts just administratively from the Medicare program on top of those cuts in the Affordable Care Act.
So we've got a chart that looks at that cut. So I'm curious, you can talk about what percentage of those cuts are to the program, but what does that mean for a person who's involved in this program?
To some extent, we're still figuring that out. You know, insurance companies will say, there's no way for you to cut our costs without us passing that cut on to someone else, that'll either have to mean plans with fewer benefits or that they'll have to exclude certain expensive doctors from their network, so people might lose the doctor that they like. You know, the argument that insurers make is every cut gets transferred over to seniors in some way.
Our guest this hour is Sam Baker of National Journal. If you want to join our conversation, for Republicans, the number is 202-585-3881. For Democrats, 202-585-3880. And Independents, 202-585-3882. Sam, explain to us why these cuts are happening. We've talked about what they are, but why are they going on?
They're going on mostly because, the cuts that were included in the Affordable Care Act were included for two reasons. One, a lot of people felt like this program was overpaying. Two, people needed savings, and that's really what you're looking at here is an administration that is trying to expand coverage and also pay for that expansion and trying to cut costs where it can within the healthcare system. So that's why you've seen some of these administrative cuts proposed. Now, insurers were able last year to turn their proposed pay cut into a pay increase. That doesn't affect the cuts that are in the Affordable Care Act. That's, again, one of these administrative cuts that was going to be sort of layered on top. But that's why you're seeing it. No one's having a great time in terms of getting paid to provide health care right now. It's a very lean time across the board.
Our first call this morning comes from Pittsburgh, Illinois. Peter is on our line for Democrats.
Yeah, I was calling in earlier for the raise taxes on these rich so we can get our country back in shape again. They're so far out on these here that we had 130 some odd new billionaires last year. I want 95 cents of that. That's the only way to get out of this mess. The only way you're going to pay the debt down. And for the Medicare deal there is, Medicare Advantage should have never been in there. They took it away, and they still got some in Florida, I think, but they took it away. And it needs to be brought back into the Medicare and get Medicare back up where it's supposed to be. And I don't think the people from making $1,000 up to $50,000 should be taxed. Everything should be taxed above, not below. Right now, the poor people are paying all the dad-blame taxes, and the rich are just getting away scot-free. And if you raise the taxes on the rich, they'll lower the cost and everything else. We got to bring costs down. If you tax them to death, they'll bring the cost down because they don't want to pay the tax. So they got to raise the taxes to get the cost down and also get this country back in shape. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, you see this debate. This is exactly a debate playing out in Congress. Do you raise taxes or create new revenue, or do you cut? And one of the places that Republicans in particular, Paul Ryan in particular really wants to cut our entitlement programs like Medicare. So, you know, you'll probably at the end of the day see some balance between the two of those. This is a form of cutting Medicare. These were some of the cuts, if you remember back during the presidential campaign. There was that whole to-do over Romney and Ryan attacking President Obama for some Medicare cuts that then the Ryan budget preserves. That includes these Medicare Advantage cuts.
Next up, in North Fort Myers, Florida, Ken's on our line for Republicans.
Yes, I'd just like to information first is that you know, the Scott or Sam Baker there said that he was you know, that the government will pay for it. Well, you know, I'm 64 years old. I've been around. I met when Medicare separated from Social Security back in the late 70s, and we've been paying this, not the government. We and the seniors that have been forced back down into below poverty levels, you know, stealing the money. $3.5 trillion out of Social Security Trust Fund, $1.5 trillion out of the Medicare Trust Fund, and you know, it's got to stop. And stop saying it's an entitlement when we put into the funds ourselves. And for every dollar we put in, a lot of people don't understand that, but for every dollar that we put in, our employer matches that fund. So, you know, there's twice as much money that's supposed to be in there, and they've never shown the other dollar, you know, per every dollar that we put in. And I really think that, you know, that when you use the word entitlement, it sounds like a welfare program. When we've been working all our lives, and most of the baby boomers have been, and there's a lot of baby boomers that won't even make it to retirement age. It's already died, and their money is absorbed into the system. And I really, you know, think it's time that everybody starts investigating into what's really theirs. Very simple to do, simple math, and I like to see that, you know, where we belong, you know, and what's ours. It's pretty pitiful when senior citizens have to eat dog food every month to make up the difference in between their rent and their electric. And since 2009, they did away with the cost of living adjustment the way it should have been by, you know, taking out electric or the utility costs and the food costs, and you know, and to bring the cost of living adjustment down. I mean, these people worked all their lives and are deserving of it.
Yeah, the caller mentioned the Medicare and Social Security trust funds, which sort of gets back to this inherent tension that we were talking about before. Excuse me, nobody likes to take a pay cut. Doctors, hospitals, insurance companies, any of the sort of stakeholders that we have in the healthcare system. But because of some of the cuts included in the Affordable Care Act, the Medicare trustees have actually projected that the length of the Medicare trust fund, that program will be solvent for, I think, an additional 12 years or thereabouts. So it's that trade-off. You know, you want a program to last longer. That means painful cuts for somebody.
I want to go now to an ad by the Coalition for Medicare Choices that talks about Medicare Advantage, and then get your take, Sam.
Medicare Advantage makes our medical care affordable.
I feel there's been enough damage done to it already without adding more.
Without Medicare Advantage, I don't know what I'd do.
I'm just not sure about all these promises.
We will talk, we will spread the word.
No more cuts to Medicare Advantage.
You know, we vote.
Sam Baker of National Journal, explain to us that ad and the group behind it.
That is an ad being run by the insurance industry here and in some districts, I believe, back home for lawmakers to see. This is ramping up right now because it's coming time for the Medicare program to set payment rates for next year for Medicare Advantage. These are pretty much the same ads that worked last year when the program proposed a pretty significant cut in Medicare Advantage payments. A very similar ad campaign started running.
The remainder of today.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I want to talk today about a subject that has immense implications for America's future. In fact, I often talk about it as being perhaps the darkest cloud hanging over the future economic well-being of our country that no one ever really talks about, and it's been hugely ignored. And that's the issue of retirement income and what people are going to do when they retire in the future. I've been focused on this for several years. My Help Committee has, over the last 2 or 3 years, had 10 hearings on this issue. We have met with a lot of the investment community and retirement benefits community to take a look at what's happening and to see whether or not we can have a better system for retirement than what we have. Right now, young people who are working to pay off a student loan debt, maybe buy a new home, put a little money away for their own kids' education later on, or if it's people who are close to retirement, a nurse who's been working all her life, someone who maybe worked in a small business, and they're 60 years old, and people are wondering, what are they going to do when they retire? And they're worried they won't have enough money to live on. And quite frankly, they're very right to be worried. If you looked at the future and you took the working force of America today and you said, what is it that this group of people in the future will need to live on when they retire? And what they have saved for retirement. There's a deficit. They don't have enough saved to retire on. How big is that deficit? Calculations in our hearing show it's about $6.6 trillion. That's a big chunk of change. That is a huge hole in the future. So when you look at what's happening, half of Americans have less than $10,000 in savings. As I talk and as we look at this, we have to remember that retirement has always been thought of as a three-legged stool. One leg is a pension, one leg is savings, and the other leg is Social Security. So what's happening now is that on the retirement pension system, the savings systems are falling down. Social Security is still strong, and I'll have more to say about that. But what we have to do is to look at how much people have in savings. Half of all Americans today that are working today have less than $10,000 in savings. Have less than $10,000 in savings. Now, when I came to the Congress in the 70s, 1 out of every 2 workers had a pension. That means they had a pension that would pay them a monthly income until the day they died. And if they died, their spouse would get it. 1 out of every 2. Today it's 1 in every 5, and it's getting worse. Only 1 in 5. It's fallen, by the way, this has fallen by 30% in just 2 decades. And again, 75 million people have no retirement plan at all. 75 million people, that's about half of the workforce in America, have no workplace retirement plan at all. Nothing. No 401ks, no IRAs, no defined benefit program, nothing. Half, 1 out of every 2, have nothing whatsoever. Unfortunately, instead of trying to improve the pension system and lift everyone up, there are too many people out there trying to score political points by scapegoating public servants for state and local budget shortfalls. Pensions aren't the cause of states' fiscal problems, and retired public servants aren't living high on the hog on the taxpayer's dime. These are simply malicious myths being spread by people who I think have 2 objectives. 1, to discredit public sector unions, and secondly, to dismantle the pension system. Pensions are one of the best ways to ensure that middle-class people can have a secure retirement because they provide a guaranteed source of income that a person can count on for as long as he or she lives. Now, can the current pension system be improved? I believe so. But there's no reason to abandon a system that has worked for millions of people. The sad truth is these days the vast majority of employees with any retirement plan at all have a 401k. Now again, I'm not here to badmouth 401ks. They can be a very good way to help people put some money aside to supplement their pension. But 401ks were never intended to replace pensions. It was to be that other leg of the stool, the savings part. Now again, we know that savings rates are too low. As I said, less than $10,000 most people have. There's no simple way also for people to convert their savings into a stream of retirement income that they can't outlive. The promise people made about 401ks was that more businesses would start them, more people would participate. Well, I was here when 401ks started. Sound like a good idea? Easy way for people to save. But decades after the start of 401ks, the number of workers participating in these plans has stayed flat. According to Monique Morrissey of the Economic Policy Institute, in 1989, participation in 401ks was at 46% of the workforce. 2010, it was 45%. So it's just stayed flat. Now, we have seen some modest increases in savings the last few years. That's what people told me at our hearings. Well, we've seen some modest increases. I said, really? Okay, let's take a look at it. Because this kind of surprised me, that we had an uptick in savings. But then we looked at the data. And what does it show? It shows who's saving what. The top 10% income earners, the top 10% of income earners in America have 100 times more saved for retirement than the median household. So we charted it out. If you see back here in 1989, they weren't too far apart. So here's the top 10%. The top 10% now have an average of $239,000 set aside for retirement. The median household, $2,500. So when you say savings have gone up, yeah, look who's saving, the top 10%. Those of us who work here. $239,000 as opposed to $2,500 for the average family. And I might just also add that buried in this chart is an unacceptable amount of racial and gender inequality in this system. The National Institute on Retirement Security recently found that Black, Asian, and Latino workers have significantly less access to a retirement plan on the job than white Americans, especially in the private sector. As a result, the vast majority of working-age households headed by people of color have little or no retirement savings. For those with a retirement plan, the average account balances for Black and Latino households are less than 1/5 that of white households. So if I'm not mistaken, 1/5 of $2,500 would be about $500. So buried in this, keep in mind, unequal gender and racial inequality. Addressing the issue of retirement security, again, would be particularly beneficial to women. We all know about the income gap between men and women. But what a lot of people don't realize is the gap worsens after retirement. And when you think about it, you can understand that. In 2011, the median annual income of older women, that is over retirement age, keep this in mind, the median annual income was $14,225. The median annual income of that same cohort of older men was $24,794. Now, why is that? What do you think about it? Unequal pay during their working years it means women have less opportunity to save. They may take some time off during their working years to start a family. They have less time to save. Additionally, women tend to be concentrated in jobs that don't traditionally offer retirement plans. It's been said many times that women save more than men, save more money than men. Well, yeah, they have higher rates, but they're starting from a very low point. So women still lag behind men when it comes to total retirement savings. So that sort of sets the stage for our committee and for me to introduce the USA Retirement Funds Act. It's S-1979, if anybody wants to write down the number of the bill. It's a new retirement program. And I'm going to explain basically how it operates here. It's the USA Retirement. Means it's universal, it's secure, and adaptable. That's what USA stands for. It would tackle the retirement crisis head-on by ensuring that the 75 million people, remember my earlier chart, 75 million people without a workplace retirement plan would have the opportunity to earn a safe and secure pension. Universal, secure, adaptable. The concept is very simple. Employers who don't offer a pension or a well-designed 401k would automatically enroll their employees in this retirement fund. Now, if an employee wanted to opt out, he or she could. No one would be forced to participate. But by making the system opt out instead of opt in, we get millions more people participating. Employer and employee contributions would go into a fund that would be managed by a board of trustees. When a participant retires, the fund would provide the retiree with a monthly benefit as long as he or she lives, and if that person died, it would go on to their spouse. Over time, as people contribute, they would earn a real retirement benefit that will be a better bang for their buck than what they could have gotten on their own. And that's because these funds would spread retirement risk over large groups of participants. A recent report by David Madlin at the Center for American Progress found that the USA Retirement Fund, with their risk pooling and professional management, would make retirement much more affordable for working families. In fact, it would cut in half the cost that people would need. It would cut in half the amount people would need to save over the present system, defined contribution 401ks right now. So basically, universal access, everybody's in. You could work for an employer, 3 employees, 4 employees, 2 employees. You could be self-employed. Universal access. You'd get monthly benefits for life. You wouldn't be borrowing against it. You wouldn't be taking out a lump sum. It would be there. You get a monthly benefit for life with a spousal survival. Professionally managed. That means that it would be managed by a board of trustees who would have a fiduciary responsibility to this pool to invest it wisely. Fiduciary responsibility. That relieves the individual from trying to figure out what's the best place to put my little meager amount of savings. You know, you wouldn't have to consider whether or not you should follow Uncle Fred's advice about this stock that he's got. You know, it's going to make you a lot of money in the future. Or Mr. Ponzi. What was that Ponzi guy's name again? All you had to do is give him a lot of money, and or maybe Bernie Madoff in later years. No, you wouldn't have to worry about that. This would be a professional board that would have a fiduciary responsibility. And as I said, lower cost, about 50%. In other words, Mr. President, what this means is that if you were 35 years old now and working, and you figured under your 401k that you would need $2 million by the time you retired in order to live out your life and have a decent retirement income, if you were involved in this program, you would only need $1 million because the cost would be that much less. A big portion of that $2 million goes into fees during the life of that 401k. So that's the big savings here. USA Retirement, that's for the person. Now let's take a look at what it means for the business. The business community itself. Yeah, right here. This is the benefits to the business. It's easy to offer. You don't have to set up a plan. Small mom and pop business, if you're filling out FICA taxes anyway, you just have a separate line for this. Send it off, you have nothing else to do. You don't have to manage it. You have no risks. You have no fiduciary responsibility as an employer, none whatsoever. And you get quality benefits. Now, what this means is that a lot of employers want to make sure that their employees have a good retirement benefit because as they get older, they earn more. You know, let's face it, you'd like to have people retire so you could bring younger people into the workforce. Well, if you've got people now that can't retire because they don't have enough money, they stay working. Well, if you have a good quality benefit, people get age of retirement, they say, well, I can retire now. I've got my retirement set up. And so it means for an employer, for a business, they get that kind of turnover that they need to bring in new, younger workers. And as I said earlier, it's professionally run. The company has no fiduciary responsibility whatsoever like they do under a defined benefit program. They don't have to manage it. They don't have to do anything. And as I said, no risk to the business whatsoever. I would add also that under the bill, employers could voluntarily contribute to the program. They don't have to, but they could voluntarily contribute. So if you're signing up one of your workers at 6%, the employer could say, you know, I want to have a good workforce. I want to hire really good people, and I've got good people. I want to keep them. I'll tell you what, I'll kick in 2% or 3% or 2.5% or kick in whatever they want as a management tool, maybe even as a recruitment tool to recruit really good workers. So again, it's a good recruitment and management tool for the businesses. And for the economy in general, I think this would be good for the economy. I think this is what a lot of people don't consider. By bringing more people into this retirement system, you're going to have more savings. And you're going to have savings that are long-term type savings. It's what we call patient capital. In other words, the capital that comes into these big retirement pools don't need to think about the quarterly bottom line, but they do think about long-term. So haven't we spent a lot of time here in this body and around the country talking about the need for infrastructure, long-term projects for this country, energy systems, electrical systems, roads, bridges, sewer, all that kind of stuff. Plus, we need long-term capital for the new entrepreneurs, starting these new businesses that may take a long time for them to return some capital, but they need that access to that long-term patient capital that something like this could provide for them. And as I said, it creates a lot of jobs. Again, because of this ability to invest over long term, you're going to start creating more jobs in our country. I want to emphasize just two more key points before I yield the floor. First, the USA retirement funds would not replace pensions or 401ks. Employers could and should continue to offer these plans at the workplace. But what this would do is give people without access to a quality employer-provided plan the opportunity to earn a retirement benefit. Second point I want to make is USA retirement funds aren't a new government program. There's already been some stories written about this in the paper, and someone said, Harkin's come up with a new government program. No, I haven't. This is not a government program. This is a 21st century retirement plan run entirely by the private sector, just like pensions and 401ks. Finally, I would just be remiss if I didn't talk about that third leg of the stool, and that is Social Security. We have to improve, I think, the most efficient, most effective retirement program we have, and that is Social Security. Last year, I, along with others, introduced the bill S567, nice easy number to remember. What it does is it expands the benefits by $65 a month. So that means that if you're at the lower income scale when you retire, your replacement rate will be a little bit better if you get $65 a month. For someone at the higher end, $65 a month, not that big a deal. But it sure helps those at the bottom end. So it would increase that by $65. It would index the living adjustment so that you would have an improved cost of living adjustment in the future, because it would look at the CPI the cost of living for elderly, and look at that and adjust it for that. And secondly, it would strengthen the trust fund by lifting the cap on the payroll tax. You do all that, you strengthen Social Security, you actually increase the benefit a little bit, and it extends the life to 2050. So it makes Social Security stronger for future beneficiaries. So, Mr. President, by improving the private retirement system, bolstering Social Security, we can do a number of things that take away that dark cloud. We can tell people, we can assure people that they'll be able to save and have a retirement benefit, an annuity, every month, for as long as they live. Secondly, we make it easier for businesses to set it up. Third, it creates jobs in our economy by long-term types of investment. So I just say that during this time of economic insecurity, it's more important than ever that working people have the opportunity to prepare for retirement. So I urge my colleagues to help rebuild the pension system in this country by supporting the USA Retirement Funds Act. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak about rapid advancements in healthcare information technology, or health IT. Health IT holds amazing potential to transform Americans' everyday lives for the better. I believe, Mr. President, that protecting this kind of exciting innovation from overregulation and excessive taxation needs to be a high priority. And that's why I'm introducing the Preventing Regulatory Overreach to Enhance Care Technology, or the PROTECT Act of 2014. Together with Senator Angus King of Maine and Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, we are putting forward this pro-jobs, risk-based framework governing health IT. But before I speak about our bill, I would first like to thank my colleague from Maine, Senator Angus King, for joining me in this effort. I'm informally telling people that our efforts might be the start of the Surf and Turf caucus here in the United States Senate, the place where Nebraska and Maine come together politically to find common ground and work to address real problems in this country. We're able to do so together because Senator King is known as an independent thinker, a problem solver who isn't afraid to work across the aisle in order to get things done. It's refreshing, and I sincerely appreciate his willingness to work with me. I also want to give special thanks to Senator Rubio for his interest in this issue as well. He is also an original co-sponsor, and he has worked with us on this important topic. So here's what we're trying to do, Mr. President. We want to clarify the Food and Drug Administration's oversight authority over health information technologies. Under current law dating back to 1976, the FDA can apply its definition of a medical device to assert broad regulatory authority over a wide array of health IT, including applications that do not pose a threat to human safety. That means low-risk health IT can be treated like traditional medical devices, subjecting job creators and innovators to these challenges that really don't make sense. So the PROTECT Act fixes this discrepancy. The PROTECT Act keeps the FDA's resources focused on products that pose the highest risk to human health. In doing so, it also gives regulatory certainty to innovators and job creators who are developing these new products that use data safely to improve health care and also to reduce its cost. Furthermore, the PROTECT Act relieves categories of low-risk clinical and health software from the 2.3% medical device tax. Most importantly, though, it protects and promotes American jobs in a key growth sector of our economy. The mobile health and mobile application market is expected to exceed $26 billion by 2017, while the U.S. mobile apps economy is responsible for nearly 500,000 new American jobs. A report from Health Data Management anticipates 23% annual growth in this sector over the next 5 years. The FDA highlights on their website that 500 million smartphone users worldwide will be using health apps by 2015. The mobile analytics platform, Localytics, which monitors more than 20,000 apps, has seen a 19% increase in new health and fitness apps in 2013 from the year prior. That's really amazing. But what's even more impressive, Mr. President, is the health IT's ability to protect people. Consider the example of a young man named Xavier Jones, whose basketball coach downloaded a $1.99 mobile application that gave him a refresher course on how to properly administer CPR. It was a skill that came in handy the very next day when Xavier collapsed in the middle of practice. In 2012, the Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs partnered to release a free Apple and Android app called the Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Coach. PTSD Coach has been downloaded over 100,000 times in 74 countries. It provides reliable information on PTSD and treatments on users' smartphones. Other types of health IT, such as electronic health records and low-risk clinical decision software, can also lower costs and they can improve outcomes. Some of these technologies hold the power to quickly and broadly disseminate new information about effective treatments and recent clinical trials. Patients want their doctors to have access to these cutting-edge therapies. Protecting low-risk health IT is about empowering people with access to information. We need to protect that kind of innovation because innovation is an equalizer for consumers. And these technological benefits, they don't stop at our borders. Think about this statistic. One estimate shows mobile health deployment in Africa could save as many as 1 million lives by 2017. From assisting nurses with scheduling, reminding pharmacists to refill their stock, or even tracking emerging malarial epidemics, mobile health is already transforming the landscape of the developing world in very dramatic ways. These stories only scratch the surface of where this technology is going. It's important how we treat innovation here in the United States. Other countries around the world are looking at how our government will regulate and oversee these low-risk technologies. Our bill makes it so low-risk, highly innovative clinical and health software technologies and the potential that they have to empower people are not undercut by these burdensome regulations. FDA's promise to use its enforcement discretion over low-risk health IT only serves to create confusion and uncertainty in the marketplace. Regulatory discretion, by its very nature, is something that can easily change over time, and discretion can be misused or abused. Clear rules should be set, because the current FDA regulatory model for medical devices is not well suited for low-risk health information technologies. In a House Energy and Commerce Committee hearing last year, the FDA submitted a letter to the committee that said, quote, "For 2011 and 2012, the average time for FDA review of medical device submissions that were identified as containing a mobile medical app was 67 days, and the average total time from submission to FDA decision was 110 days," unquote. When regulatory days turn into months, problems are going to persist. And that's not something that we should leave to discretion. The regulatory timeline for risky devices shouldn't be the same for these low-risk software that gets released every 60 days, has major updates every month, and sees regular changes every week. Having an approval process that takes longer than the shelf life of the average device operating system, well, you know, it stifles opportunity and it stifles innovation. Innovators, regulators, and consumers need clarity and certainty into how these regulations are going to be enforced. Since mobile wellness apps and most clinical decision support technologies pose little risk to patients, they should not be subject to the same costly, painstaking processes as medical devices. The answer is the common sense, risk-based regulatory approach that the PROTECT Act provides. It protects innovation. It protects jobs here in the United States, and it protects jobs in this U.S.-based job sector. Most importantly, it protects patient safety by giving the FDA continued authority and oversight over health IT that is risky, and by creating an appropriate regulatory framework for that which is lower risk. With the introduction of the PROTECT Act, I would also like to acknowledge the great work of Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado, and others who have undertaken this in the past. These senators have helped to lay the groundwork for the development of a risk-based framework for health IT. The ideas included in the PROTECT Act would not be possible without the progress that they secured in previous Congresses and in the FDA Safety and Innovation Act. I'm committed to working with anyone on these issues, to exchange views, to exchange ideas, so we can get the right policy balance our country needs and deserves. And again, I thank my friends Senator King from Maine and Senator Rubio from Florida for joining me in this important effort. Together, we can achieve our shared vision of protecting patient safety, protecting innovation, and protecting U.S. economic jobs growth and opportunity. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The senator from Maine.
Before joining Senator Fisher, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that Chris Schweitzer, a military fellow in the